Okay, we're back from the break. Thank you again for tuning in tonight. And we've been talking a little bit about seasonal allergies and that time of the year, which is coming upon us. And I was talking about the using of the Afrin and those particular sprays, trying to avoid them as much as possible. Certainly, if you can't sleep at night, it can be very effective. One of the things I like are the Breathe Right nasal strips. They are very effective in opening up the nose, and I usually put a little bit of Vaseline or something on the bridge of my nose if I'm going to use those, because they have the adhesive all the way across, and it actually pulls some of the skin off your nose. But the adhesive is on the side, and it actually just opens up these turbinates just enough to where air can pass through them. And another thing that you can do this time of the year is called nasal douching, using nasal spray to wash out some of the allergens and things of that nature. So, Ray, you're called in.
Yes, I did. Miss Rogers had the line tied up for quite a while, but she had an interesting point, alternative medicine. I mean, I agree with that 100%. There's so many things out there. And so I posed a question maybe relating to that, Doc. I hear a lot on the internet now and some doctors on TV talking about the Trojan horse theory regarding cancer research, where something would be teamed up to go to the cancer cells and kill them, and it would be antacid, something like baking soda. They use molasses and baking soda on a regular basis. And some people claim they've been cured or in remission of cancer. Are you familiar with this? And maybe you could explain it a little bit if you are. I'd appreciate it.
No, I really haven't heard about that particular remedy working for cancer cures. However, the idea of the Trojan horse is to compound or select a particular portion of that cell, take something in that the cancer cell most rapidly dividing cell would take in because it needs it more readily than something else, and that in turns tend to degrade the cell. One of the things that's very interesting about cancer, and I kind of want to, it may digress a little bit about that, but one of the things that is important is that a cell that can die will never become a cancer cell. And a cell that's allowed to live and mutate will indeed become a cancer cell. So one of the things we talk about a lot is antioxidant therapies and, eating green vegetables and eating these things of that nature. And the idea is to maintain an intact DNA structure. But if you're trying to take too many vitamins and too many antioxidants, you can actually almost, and I say this because I don't have any study to back it up, but see if it doesn't make sense in a sense that if you allow a cell to continue to live that's supposed to die, it may mutate, and if it mutates, it may become a cancer cell. So too many antioxidants and too many things in that line may actually be bad for you and may actually be cancer promoting. So I think this is a very, very interesting area of medicine. I read somewhere where they think cancer is just one of those unlucky things that happens. Well, I believe we form cancer cells all the time because the cell doesn't exactly die when it's supposed to, so therefore it can mutate into a cancer cell. And that's where that BRCA2 gene mutation comes up in breast cancer. And what that means is that estrogen, and a BRCA2 patient, basically, estrogen comes in and tries to keep the breast cell cancer alive. And in doing so, it allows for the breast cell to mutate to become cancers. And so that's why it's a very interesting interlay between cell life and cell death and cancer formation. So I think it's a whole thing, and who knows where it all goes, and who knows where the end of this all lies. But I believe good nutrition, and I believe not putting a bunch of carcinogens in your body, eating healthy food, non-GMO based food, getting regular amounts of sleep, staying away from all the things that are cancer producing that you can, it will go a long way to helping your odds odds of never getting cancer, and then hopefully never getting to have to deal with a cure. Now, that being said, there are genetic types of, if you look at families that have different types of cancers, there is a genetic predisposition, and that's what I talk about, that genetic mutation where the cell isn't allowed to die, but allowed to mutate and then becomes cancerous. But part of that process too is, let's talk about smoking and drinking, or let's just talk about smoking in general. I mean, when the body responds to stress, and I talked about this the other day, if you work with your hands, you're going to develop a callus. The callus comes from blisters. So you irritate the skin, it changes and it becomes thickened so as to prevent further blister formation. The same thing happens in your body when you inhale smoke. It basically turns our nice columnar epithelium. I talked about it on a previous show with COPD, it turns it to a squamous epithelium, which is that in our skin. So that process is called metaplasia, meaning when you take one cell type and change it to another cell type, that's a change in the genetic structure of that particular cell. And if you do that over and over and over again, then chances are you may actually mutate a cell that turns into cancer. And if your immune system is run down because of other issues, then you're going to develop a cancer. That being said, people who drink and smoke, and we see a lot of that in this community, if they drink and they smoke, 100% of the time, they're going to get cancer, throat cancer. It's not will you, it's when will you. So for all you drinkers and smokers out there, you will get throat cancer. That being said, you might want to think about one that you like more than the other. But being said, you're introducing alcohol with another carcinogen, benzopyrenes, and you're constantly irritating those tissues, and you will develop throat cancer. So that's 100% thing. Now, cervical cancer is one of those cancers in women where you have a transition zone because of their estrogens. They transition from a squamous epithelium to a endometrium epithelium, and that line of tissue in the cervix is where you get cervical cancer. So metaplasia is one of those things that does aid in cancer formation. So I don't know, Ray, are you still on the line or did you leave? You must have left. Okay. So I hope that answered his question. So the Trojan horse idea is a great idea. The other thing is they basically will take certain cells, try and find how we can stimulate our immune system to go in and find certain proteins on them to kill those cells. I know they're doing that with melanoma and other cancers that are out there. So let's hope one day they can actually get at the genetic genome of a cancer type, and hopefully they can do that. Chemotherapy is, it works in some cases, but chemotherapy, as I've talked about before, is one of those things where if you have 1 million cancer cells and you give, or 1 million bacteria, if you don't have an attacked immune system, it's very difficult to get a cure. And the reason is that when you give chemotherapy, you kill good tissue and bad tissue together. And what's the most rapidly dividing tissues in our body? It's our immune system. So here we are, we're wiping out the cancer cells, but we're also limiting our white blood cell, red blood cell production. And that being said, we may not develop the immunity, but what are you going to do? So 1 million cancer cells get killed by a specific product. Then what's left behind is 100,000 that didn't succumb to that particular chemotherapy. Now you have resistant cancer cells. You go into remission only for those cancer cells to go through a doubling time to show up again. And that being said, I mean, you buy yourself years. So let's hope you take the message and heed it by trying to eat right and do the right things to reduce your risk of getting cancer. But as I've always said, nobody gets out of here alive, so it all matters what you do in between the time you're born and, of course, the time that you die. Okay, so getting back to seasonal allergies, one of the things that is very important is to keep in mind the antihistamines. And that being said, there's something in these trees that are a little bit allergic producing, but Anyway, stay away from the four-way nasal sprays, and nasal cortisone can be very useful, and using the nasal spray to help nasal douching to wash out any allergens that are in your house. One of the things people do is they come in asking for cortisone injections, and I definitely do not like to do that, because when you give 40 to 60 milligrams of Kenalog, you basically induce a whole host of changes within a body that are not necessarily very good. You basically elevate blood glucose. You break down muscle tissue. You do block the immune system, and you slow down your immune system. So you become more susceptible to certain viruses and other things. And I will say that about nasal cortisone, and that it does enhance your ability to get certain viral infections by reducing the local immunity in your mucous membrane. So beware when you're using those nasal cortisone sprays. It can actually promote viral infections. It's one of the risks and side effects of that. So I don't like injectable cortisone. If you take more than 2,000 milligrams in a lifetime, you are at risk of a process called aseptic necrosis of the hip. And that is a process by where there's one blood vessel that feeds the greater trochanter, which is that bone that isolates your hip, the one that you can feel. It can vasoconstrict that and cause necrosis of that bone. Aseptic means no infection, and that's the risk if you give more than 2,000 milligrams of that particular product. So I try and hold off on giving injections of cortisone. They last a short period of time. They're great the first time, they're great the second time, but they're not good in long term. And we have a lot of diabetes in this community, and it elevates blood sugar. So beware of the cortisone injection and try to avoid those, if at all, at cost. Okay, so when we come back from this break we're going to talk a little bit about high blood pressure. And if you could bring up this slide, which is, we want to talk about one of the things I had kind of left off in a previous show, which was the slide on treatment. And so I guess we'll probably hopefully do that when we come back from the break, which we're going to go to right now. And stay tuned, we're going to talk about high blood pressure treatment. Thank you for tuning in tonight.